Thank you for joining us tonight for the first ever digital fundraising conference. My name is Leanne from Outsource CFO, and I'm a practice manager. And tonight with me, I have Ian Lissam from Havaic. Hello, Ian.
Hi there.
And I have Manuel Koza from Silvertree Holdings. Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. Okay, so thank you, gentlemen, for availing yourselves at such short notice for this digital conference, in spite of the circumstances of the COVID-19 that we find ourselves and the rest of the world in. The topic for discussion tonight will be, what do investors want? And I think both of you being in that space will be able to assist us with. We're looking forward to all the information that you have for us this evening. So I'll start with Ian. Can you please tell us what does your fund do? What deals do you target, and what is the mandate of your fund?
Yes, certainly. So thank you very much for having us. So at Havaic, we invest in early stage, high growth local technology companies that have the potential to scale internationally. Internationally can be into other parts of Africa, it can be into Europe, it can be into the US, it can be into Asia. But we really look for young businesses that have at least some traction. So it can be 1 client, 2 clients, 3 clients. So we are quite early stage, that have technology and expertise that resonate both locally and internationally, and we look to partner with them and helping them to scale both locally, as I said, and into international markets.
Great. And Manuel, what sort of deals do you target, and what is the mandate of your fund?
Thanks, Leanne. So firstly, to clarify, we're not a fund, so we are a permanent capital base.
Right.
We have a balance sheet that we invest off, which allows us to do a couple of things. One, we don't need to look for exit. Generally, we fund the business through the life cycle over time. So we can do seed, growth, and kind of buyout capital all at once. It also allows us to have a team, so a 25 people team that supports our kind of portfolio companies and fellow entrepreneurs, anything from legal, finance, recruiting, controlling, tech development across the line. So we get economies of scale and we get the experience curve, know-how doing things a couple of times. Mm-hmm. We generally focus on South African companies, consumer brands and consumer internet companies, the kind of portfolio of 12 brands. And yeah, I want to scale them mostly in South Africa, but also with the potential to go international, and a very kind of entrepreneurial setup, and kind of very much focused on alignment of interest from top to bottom.
Interesting, thank you. The venture capital landscape in South Africa, it is still very new and very young. And Ian, how do you see it right now? And what is your take on the venture capital landscape in South Africa?
Yeah, I think we're at a very exciting place in the VC journey. So, of course, people have been investing in young businesses for years. But it's only really in the last couple of years that we're seeing the rise of, let's say, more formal or traditional type of institutional investing in the space, which is great, because the more capital that comes into the sector, the more chance it has of ultimately flourishing. So, you know, it is still early days. The base is low, but what you would know, I'm sure all the viewers would know, is the growth rates are kind of accelerating year on year. And I think also a pleasing trend is particularly in the last couple of years, we're seeing a drastic increase in foreign investors in this space, where they quite pleasingly look to partner with local investors such as ourselves. So often what we find is that we come in quite early. We work with the businesses, get them what many would deem, let's say, Series A ready, and then as we have to scale into other markets, we partner with international investors. So for our portfolio companies, for instance, we've got really, really large, well-known VCs from Japan, from the US, from Europe, who are partnering with us in subsequent funding rounds, which is not something you saw very often a few years ago, and I think it's a great sign of things to come.
Correct. You're right to say that there are a lot of, investors that are coming from Europe and America to come into South Africa. Manuel, you yourself are not, you're from Germany, and why have you picked South Africa instead of investing anywhere else in the world?
Yeah, good question. I get this asked a lot from my friends.
Do you?
It's not the obvious choice, but for me, it was actually the obvious choice because it's the probably most amazing place on earth to live. Exciting landscape, weather-wise, it's very different to cold Germany I'm from.
Oh yeah.
And I think there are very interesting pockets of growth and pockets of excellence. The VC space was very, very young when I moved down 9 years ago to start my first entrepreneurial business. And we subsequently saw how difficult it is to raise capital, how little support there was 9 years ago, and obviously subsequently has grown a lot and developed a lot this way. We said, cool, we have now a lot of learning, we have a little bit of capital, let's invest this into and create opportunities wherever we can, because we believe long-term, these trends you see, consumers moving from offline to online, the millennial consumer caring about craft, caring about sustainability. This is a global trend, not an isolated trend. So we can almost like look a little bit in the future and catch these trends and kind of make sure we can prove a business from beginning to end, because this entrepreneurial journey is very hard, and you want partners by your side that can help you weather the storm.
Okay, interesting. The question that is probably on everybody's mind and on my mind as well is, Ian, what does a successful deal look like? I mean, what do you look like? What do you look for? What do you look for in a transaction?
It's a very good question. I mean, almost building on why South Africa, why Cape Town, and it does apply to other African markets, which we also invest into, is that often we don't give ourselves enough credit for some of them, and Manuel spoke about some of the excellence that we have here. So, for instance, Cape Town, people say, why Cape Town? So in Cape Town, there are more devs sitting in Cape Town than every other city in Africa, except for Johannesburg combined. So there's, massive talent. Why does Amazon Web Service have, I think, the third biggest office? I could be, third or fourth biggest office in the world sitting in Cape Town, again, because we've great talent. Why was Amazon Web Service actually launched from Cape Town? Because we have great talent. So often we don't give ourselves enough credit for some of the amazing, people that we have here.
Absolutely.
But I was just sort of building on that question, but coming to the question you just asked, I mean, for us, it's all about investing in local skills where we have a right to play, and we have something that, from a technology point of view, is both interesting in South Africa or in East Africa, for instance, in Kenya, for instance, or in Tanzania, or even Nigeria, that can enter other markets. And we like businesses that are tech-enabled and the technology allows them to scale. So I've got to be careful because we have 12 portfolio companies. I think I can only pick one for the purpose of this. So if any of the others are listening and I didn't pick you, we love you very much. But it's just a nice topical example because it's our most recent investment. Is in December last year, we invested in a health tech business specializing in audiology technology called Hearix. It is quite a well-known business locally. But taking a step back, so we have 3 health tech investments, Hearix, Recomed, and Vuna Mobile. And why health tech? So as many of you know, we have some of the best doctors in the world. Many international doctors actually come and do the internships here, particularly in the emergency services space, because the realities of South Africa is we do have under-resourced government hospitals, but we have a demand, from patients to use them. So if you can thrive or survive in that environment, you can pretty much work anywhere in the world, and that's the basic thesis there. So health tech, great doctors, great experience, etc., great skills. In the medical space. So that's kind of why health tech. Why Hearix in particular is it's a great example. So many years ago, a professor of audiology, which for those who don't know, audiology is effectively the study of hearing and hearing loss and all those types of things. He effectively invented a way to combine all this massive old school machinery that sits in an audiologist's practice, so big kind of Siemens machines that test your ears, into an app on your cell phone and a few, bits of hardware that sits in standard earphones. And that in itself was quite amazing. That product was rolled out into over 30 countries. But as you can imagine, audiology is very specialist, it's very niche. And you're also competing against, as I said, the likes of the Siemens. You have massive market. If someone's gone and bought large equipment, they're not going to go and get rid of that. They're going to keep it until basically it's, no longer works. So these guys, they realized early on that they needed to use their incredible technology to find solutions that don't exist in the world. So they came up with quite a few. The one that I'll sort of use as an example is they effectively have technology that specializes in preventative hearing loss. So premature or hearing loss that should otherwise not have happened is growing globally at an exponential rate, simply because people are listening to music or watching TV or whatever it may be in a way that it's damaging their ears and it's causing them to go deaf, which is a massive issue. So their technology, it sits in your mobile phone, it sits in your earphones, and it basically regulates what you're listening to, and it will auto-program and correct it so that you don't damage your ears. So if you imagine as a parent, it's quite useful. So I've got 3 little kids. Probably I put on the earphones so that I don't necessarily have them and I damage my own ears, but that's not the example. So that what they're listening to is safe.
Yeah.
Long story, but I'll get to the crux of it. So great technology, great use case, local right to play. And now we talk about the internationalization of the business. So when we invested alongside Bose Ventures. So Bose Ventures is the venture capital arm of Bose, being, the household name sound company. So they make speakers, earphones, etc., etc. And very few people know that Bose is actually owned by MIT, one of the probably preeminent technology research universities in the world. And a prerequisite for them to invest was they had to go to their 4,000 engineers and say, listen, can you guys copy this technology? And the engineers basically said, look, we can, but it's going to take us a couple of years and it's going to cost us, I'll just exaggerate and say billions and trillions, but obviously a lot of money. Rather invest with them or into them and look to partner with them. And that's exactly what they did. And subsequent to that, so let's say in parallel to that, the company was launching a few of their products. I won't go into all the detail in the US, but having a Bose on the cap table as a significant shareholder has certainly helped to accelerate that. So again, the thesis, invest local talent, right to play, and then find partners to work with to internationalize that business. And ultimately for us, it's very much around the international exit. So we look for businesses like that. I think that hopefully answers that question.
Yeah, that is fine. Thank you. I think from your example, we can really see that the tech industry, online businesses, e-businesses are thriving in this kind of space that we find ourselves in the 21st century. Manuel, what do you see the industry going? And what do you see as the upsides or possible downsides of this industry?
So if you take a million steps back, why do you want to shop online, right? This thing we all carry in our pockets is a more efficient way to communicate than going to a store, for instance, or going to a bank branch. So the reason you've seen this big uptake in music streaming or kind of e-commerce shopping is because of that. It's fundamentally a better channel. But what it doesn't solve for is just the channel, right? So you still need to solve a consumer problem better than the next best alternative, and you need to do it significantly better. So in the South African case, it's very, very unique. We currently, from an e-commerce penetration perspective, sit somewhere around 2%. If you look in kind of the US or China or Europe, you're anywhere between 13, 14, and 22%. So, you can look a little bit into the future where this trend will go. But obviously, countries are not comparable. South Africa is very different. So in the South African case, the interesting piece is that the offline players are very, very strong. Retailers are incredibly strong in this space, banks, insurers, and not only on a South African or African case, even on a global scale. So in order to win, you need to solve a very niche problem significantly better than Woolies can do in food. So we backed YouCook very early on, and despite Woolies going into the space, Pick n Pays and Checkers, and copying this concept of meal delivery kit, because they went all the way into the vertical and defined the business mission around it and could think about quick adaptation when there was water shortage or power shortage, design the recipes around it, could work with a lot of local suppliers that probably would never ever pass Woolies procurement process because it's very stringent, but you're supporting a township farmer that gives back to society. You can build a whole story around this and craftsmanship rather than just being this big corporate that no one can relate to. So I think long term this is going to go there. The question how quickly it will be that get there is dependent on how many entrepreneurs build exciting businesses in that space.
Definitely. And a lot of our entrepreneurs are really entering the market and, coming up with impressive ideas. Have Ag recently expanded its funds? Ian, how are you going to ramp up your investment activities? I mean, in the next while, what can entrepreneurs do to get your attention?
So, I mean, it's very much around being able to exhibit, some of the things that I mentioned. Are you technology enabled? Do you have a right to play in that space? What markets can you enter into? But a big part is also around management itself. So because we are a very early stage investor, we like businesses where management have the majority stake of the business. And we take a big view on management themselves. So, what experience do you have in the space? As I said, what rights do you have in the space? How do you behave? What clients do you have networks with? Where do you need help? That type of thing. Those are kind of the softer things we look at. I mean, I guess the big thing is raising money, and I think we'll touch a little bit on this later. Often people think it's a quick road to success. So first of all, any what they say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I often mix up metaphors, so if I got it wrong, I apologize. But effectively, you want a VC who takes his time to get to know you, gets to know your business, but actually importantly, you want an investor who you know and you understand their qualities and can they add value. So patience is key. Businesses are not built in a day. Things always take longer than you think, and they still take even longer than that. So you need to be patient. You need to be, I suppose, thick-skinned in many ways, and keep your eye on the prize at the end of the day. I mean, we the one thing just worth touching on is we just see those type of qualities coming out more and more and more. And I'm sure Manuel will reiterate or reinforce that idea is that this entrepreneurial spirit, but this mature entrepreneurial spirit is really starting to come to the fore in South Africa and in other parts of Africa, as I mentioned, East Africa, West Africa. And that really is super exciting.
Manuel, what are the critical things that you want to see in an entrepreneur before you even begin to say, look, we're going to invest or to consider investing in the company?
People first. Tenacity is probably the biggest point for me. This is going to be roller coaster. It's going to be high highs, super lows. You will doubt that this was a good idea. You will ignorance is a little bit bliss, but if I would have known back then when I started my entrepreneurial journey now, I wouldn't have not done it because it's freaking crazy and it's very, very hard. And there are a lot of easier ways to kind of make a living, and but it's exciting and you learn a lot. So tenacity is incredibly important. I think probably point number 2 is passion. The reason I left my first business is because I don't really care about fashion at all. I'm not a person who's going to run a fashion e-commerce business for the rest of my life. And you see that, right? The founding part was exciting, building up a business, solving a problem, and everything that comes with it. And you need to be passionate. And I think if I look at our winning teams, the core indicators are those two: it's tenacity and passion. It's not necessarily who had the smartest and best grades or who worked at what corporate. It's way more complicated than that. And I think tenacity, passion are key. And then obviously business model, like we like high margin business models and kind of clear differentiators that can last, and you can build kind of some sort of competitive mold around. And not just, hey, I read TechCrunch, someone is doing this in the US, let's copy paste into South Africa, with no passion, with no downside risk in terms of personal salary or personal money invested. So normally if you see tenacity and passion, you see alignment of interest, they've risked their house, low salary paid, big time and cash investment, and not just, I want to be the next Mark Zuckerberg and I'm going to copy something that might not make sense in a South African context.
Interesting. Okay, so Ian, could you give a few tips maybe for entrepreneurs who want to proactively build their company to be funding ready?
Yeah, so look, I mean, funding is many things. So you've got angel and seed funding, and then you've got, which I'd call the softer, friendlier funding. So in order to be angel and seed ready, I think you have to have a lot of qualities up front. And Manuel mentioned, no one's going to invest in you if you don't have those, if you don't have the tenacity, the passion, the expertise, etc. So funding ready at that stage is probably more of an emotional thing than anything else, I guess, or a softer thing at least. But when you start to look for institutional funding, of which VCs typically your earlier institutional funding, you need to understand, and this is often missed, is that you are taking investment from someone who is not sitting in your business. And why that's very important is, if I'm sitting in your business day to day, so you may be strategically involved, we typically sit on board seats, we have an advisory arm that helps the businesses, etc. And Manuel's business, I think, is a bit different. I think they are a little bit more hands-on than most. But basically, you have to give a return to someone who isn't day-to-day making more money in your business. So what you have to understand is, although a business can make you a lot of money, you in the business, can it make someone who's not in the business a lot of money? And that's often missed. So there's a big difference between paying yourself a high salary and returning profit to a shareholder. And that I often feel is missed. So, I guess that's the first question entrepreneurs should ask themselves. Are they in a position where they can return profit to someone who's not going to be actually adding day-to-day value, i.e. not making money in the business? The second thing is around your let's say, corporate setup. So, of course, any investor or any formal investor, they want to see reporting, they want controls, they want to know that you're on top of things, right? So there's a big difference between, I started a business with my best friend, I trust him or her implicitly, you do what you want with the credit card, I'll do what I want with the credit card, you hire who you want, you spend what you want, right? I trust you. Third party investor, yes, and I trust you, please can you just show me the proof? So if you are not set up, i.e. you don't have the right accounting structures in place, you don't have the right legal framework in place, do not expect an investor or a traditional or institutional investor to take you too seriously. And then the third thing is the vision. Again, our game is very much around profit at exit. So what is the vision of the business? How are you going to actually return capital to an outside shareholder? Because I don't want to invest in a business. So again, Manuel's business will be a bit different, but I don't want to invest in a business in perpetuity and hope one day my children inherit it. I want to invest in a business that I'm going to exit in 5, 7, maybe 10 years time. How am I going to do that? And understanding how you build it. It doesn't just happen. Sometimes people get lucky, but more than not, you have to plan meticulously and hope you also get lucky along the way.
Yeah.
So you need that, let's say, limited foresight to plan ahead and say, well, how am I as an entrepreneur going to ultimately make money from this venture? If your goal in life is to make money from the venture, you often do things for other reasons, which is also fine. But certainly a for-profit capitalistic investor such as a traditional VC, while they hope they do good along the way, they're there to ultimately make money and return profits to their investors. So all of these things are super important consideration.
Thank you so much. The last question is for you, Ian. Manuel, sorry about that. The last question is for you, Manuel, and it says, what do businesses need to change? In light of COVID-19, which is a very critical, and we're at a very crucial stage where we find ourselves in South Africa and in the rest of the world. What do businesses need to do or change in their fundraising strategy at the moment?
Look, I think it's a quite important question, because I think we're coming out of the longest bull market in history of 11 years. Money was fairly easy. Borrowing money was very easy. I think you had a huge tech boom. The reality is money sources will dry up. So the first kind of asset class that money will be drawn out of is private, high-risk emerging market kind of asset class. So that doesn't mean there's no capital. And it shouldn't be kind of holding you back. But and if you look back in history, some of the best companies got started during the midst of the crisis, the most profitable one, because suddenly now we need to accept and fully embrace that the rules of the games have changed. You can't just put together a quick PowerPoint presentation and run around to all kind of 20, 30 sources of capital. Generally, the hurdle, and I think Ian mentioned a lot of these points earlier, to get funding ready as an entrepreneur will be a lot higher, because suddenly instead of 20, 30 people looking at the space, it'll be 10 or it'll be 5. And the hurdle in terms of the last 11 years, it was driven by revenue growth, and it evaporated into crazy decisions like the WeWork debacle. It'll go from revenue now to profits, and it goes back to a funding model that I can explain to my grandmother, because in the olden days, what you did, you went to the bank, you borrowed some money against your name, you started a business that made profits to pay back the loan, and that's your proof if you have a business or not, is profits at some stage. So the VC is there, or like venture capital is there to kind of accelerate you in terms of growing and bridge this gap. But I feel we veered off a bit and it got a little bit crazy. So I think if you have a good idea and if you're a strong entrepreneur, you're passionate and tenacious about what you do, go ahead. There will always be sources, either on the angel side or on the VC side, that will want to back you. But just realize it'll be a lot tougher and the terms will be different than 2 or 3 months ago. And you double check that you're really, really happy that you will want to spend the next 7 years of your life on this topic, because that's at least how long it's going to take.
Sure. Okay, Ian, any last thoughts?
So I mean, we mustn't forget that in any crisis, an opportunity or many opportunities present themselves. So the world has changed and is changing very, very quickly. And of course, capital is going to become more scarce, but how entrepreneurs respond to this is quite key. So, the nice thing about being a small business is you can be nimble, versus a big corporate. It's quite difficult for a big corporate of 1,000, 2,000, 40,000 people to respond and adapt is challenging. If you're a small business of 2 to 15 people, you can do things quite differently. So what we're actually seeing in some of our portfolio companies, well, first of all, because they're all technology based, and most of their infrastructure is, in the cloud, supported by decentralized servers, they are able to decentralize or virtualize. I don't know if that's a real word. If it's a real word, I'll use it. It's not, I apologize. The opposite. Yeah, we'll start a new one. So they can, they can work remotely, which means there's a lot of business continuity. But even more so, there are services that will become high demand services. So, for example, effective communication channels, businesses that can deliver effective communication, particularly in the rural areas, and that can be two-way. That can be from a treatment point of view, that can be from a notification point of view, can thrive. Payments, all of us at this stage are very cognizant that as your sort of social distancing levels locally increase, your one point of risk, I suppose, is through payment. So then, is there a future where there's true, contactless payment? That is where we're going. But is this going to accelerate that? If you have technology that helps to accelerate this may be a great time for you to flourish. Emergency services, your ability to access emergency services through non-physical means, i.e. not using your cell phone or not having to flag someone down, whatever it may be. These are obviously, there's millions and millions of examples, but while capital may be scarce, those who really apply their minds can potentially, and I don't want to say capitalize on crisis because that's horrible, but certainly can look for a way to respond and positively impact not only their own business but those around them.
No, thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and thank you for availing yourselves to be able to be a part of this digital fundraising conference.
Hey, Louw here, one of the founders of Outsource CFO. If you enjoyed this video, make it official. Click subscribe.